Hello folks. Well, let's keep on going with Bash. This time around I think we'll take a look at arrays just to get a bit of a feel for that. I think we've stumbled across it once or twice in our earlier examples, but we'll try it a little more formally now. So the basic syntax is, if you want to create an array and initialize it, just round brackets and then the values to go inside separated by spaces. And of course, it's Bash, everything is actually text, but stick whatever you want in there. When you go through to access individual elements, you can go through and set an element using kind of pretty traditional syntax. So the position you want in square brackets, you can use variable values inside, and so that works fairly naturally. The syntax does get a little stranger as we start trying to look things up. When you want to look up a value, you're essentially trying to evaluate, so you've got this the dollar in front. The curly brackets just help Bash understand exactly what it is the dollar sign is getting applied to. So you'll usually see it like this: the dollar sign, the curly brackets around the array, and the position you want to access. So that is probably the most common way you'll wind up looking up the value of an array element. You can look up the size of an array if you like. So it's basically just the, again, dollar and the curly brackets to let Bash know what you're evaluating. The pound sign, the array, and the square brackets. And the @ sign in here, you can kind of think of as representing all, right? So instead of looking at a specific position, we're looking at the whole array and we want to grab the size of it and treat it as an integer pretty much. So that will actually give you back the number of elements stored in the array. If you actually want to get a copy of the array, if you want to get a copy of all of the content, then probably the easiest way is to use, again, the dollar and curly brackets around it, and then the array all, again, pretty much. So we'll have a play with all that in just a second, but just to introduce all of the syntax, there are the basics for looking things up. So if we wanted to go through and create an array and then use our C style of for loop to iterate through the elements, right? We're going to go through and initialize the array to 10 and 20, hello, and 30. We'll look up the size. So again, we're using the dollar curly brackets, the hash, the array name, and then the @ sign inside to indicate we want a count of all of the elements here. And then we'll just say, okay, well, for each position from 0 and while we're less than the size, increment by 1 each time through, look up the current element. So again, that's using our syntax to grab a single element, and then we'll just print it out. So nothing too terribly surprising there once you get used to the syntax for looking up elements. Again, we can use the idea of in with for loops to go through the elements of an array. So the idea here is we're going to say, so for whatever your variable name is, for value in, and again, we're specifying that we want the whole array, so we want the collection of array elements. And I suspect I'm missing a closing quote there. Good typo to catch. So for value in, and we'll go through an actual working example in a second, but for each element of the array, here we're just going to print it out. You can go through and delete elements or delete the entire array using unset. So if you say unset in an individual array element, the elements further on are still there, and you can unset the entire array. Actually, you can append to an array using plus equals that I didn't put in the slides here, but we'll do an example of in just a second as well. So let's have a play with some of the actual code and see if we can get that working a little bit here. So I'm going to take a look at an arrays.sh script that's just got a bunch of code to play with arrays in it. So we're going to go through and initialize an array, r equals, yo ho ho. And this is in honor of a couple of days from now, it's International Talk Like a Pirate Day. So let's see. We can use, I mentioned the plus equals to an append to an array. So we're starting the array off with 3 elements, and then we're adding more afterwards, just 1 more in this case, but you could have an entire collection of things there. So it effectively resizes the array as you go. Actually, on that note, if you assign to an array position that's sort of off the end of the array, it will expand the array for you. Again, we'll use this as an example of looking up the size of the array, so hopefully that's going to come up with 4. And then we'll look through a couple of examples of loops to go through and print each element of the array. So the first one, we'll use that idea of in, for element in and our array content, where I actually remember the closing double quote this time. We'll just print out the current element. And then we'll go through the same idea again, using the C-style for loop, right, where we'll just go through the index positions, 0 to size -1, grab the current element, and print it out. So hopefully the 2 loops will both just print out the yo-ho-ho matey as individual elements. So we'll give that a try. And cross your fingers. Hey, it actually worked. So it came out and told us that the array is size 4, went through each of the 4 elements in the for loop using in, and each of the 4 elements with the for loop using index. All right, so there's a quick intro to arrays in Bash. Again, there is much more you can do with them. Feel free to explore and look for more syntax and more features, but this gets us up and functional and running with them. All right, we will leave it there for now.